Already demonized in the culture wars, our internal, postmodern version of Origin of the Species is not clearly ready for prime time. Certainly not for a public that apparently believes higher education is anything more than job training. But we must nonetheless, I believe, take the risk and find compelling and accessible ways of communicating the humanities at their most fierce to both the campus and the public. So if a course in Latino studies means castigating the United States for its racist history, so be it. Don't attempt to placate the opposition. Don't attempt to sugarcoat the truth. Not doing so, not sugarcoating the truth, will make it clear, for example, that job training, which our president exalts, can be a death sentence. It can mean an income doing something that you in fact hate to do. The humanities and the social sciences, on the other hand, can help students understand what work is, what work takes from you, what work can cost in freedom and self-realization. Far too many people become trapped by family and property into unfulfilling occupations. We should not send students out into the world deceived about what their futures should be. The humanities and social sciences are now burdened with transmitting that unwelcome wake-up call. This is particularly important to the first-generation college students that will make up the majority of the increasing number of undergraduates nationwide, and certainly a major portion of new students at NMSU over the next 20 years at least. A union, and only a union, can guarantee that those first-generation students will have the mentoring that they need. None of this is testable. I do not ask my Holocaust poetry students to take multiple choice tests about the capacity for human evil. Fill in one of the three bubbles. Human beings are basically good, human beings are basically evil, human beings are nothing except what history makes them. I don't suggest that we devise multiple choice tests about the dehumanizing character of much industrial and corporate labor. I do not suggest that we evaluate students' understanding of what it means to struggle for values in a world in which no values are guaranteed. The accountability and assessment movement, on the other hand, which has largely overswept K-12 education, now has its eyes on us. It has a wedge issue, the education of K-12 teachers. Case law gives the state a vested interest in the education of elementary and high school students, and thus state education and regional and national accrediting agencies are seeking more power and uniformity over teacher training programs that are obviously central to NMSU. Look for more prescribed syllabi, more identical final examinations, less academic freedom, less opportunity for variation in educational philosophy. If you want to resist those changes on your own campus, you need to be organized. And the accountability movement intersects with the profit sector's altogether instrumental view of education. Education for some interested parties now, and that includes some foundations, includes four separate things: delivering content, teaching skills, providing socialization, and managing credentialing. And for some, these four aims can be unbundled, and all of them can be provided more cheaply than traditional higher education can. Of course, those four aims say nothing about inspiring students and making an intellectual and psychological difference in their lives. Nothing about encouraging opportunities for student devotion to a particular intellectual or social project. Nothing about the value of exposing students to conflicting disciplinary agendas and paradigms. Nothing about the socialization to disciplinary models of knowledge. Nothing about becoming a critical intellectual. Nothing about democracy's need for citizens who can think independently. Nothing about the relationship between intellectual fascination and the acquisition of content. The right thinks it's all about content. If you become fascinated about something, you acquire the content without even thinking about it. In the current economic climate, almost anything on the other hand, that we actually ask for humanities disciplines is likely to be heard and dismissed as special pleading. Certainly on the eve of what I expect to be emerging campus budgetary wars between disciplines, that will be the likely result of arguing for funding within the university. The process of allocating existing resources is already becoming more brutal, self-interested, and indeed preordained. You know what the outcome is going to be before the battle begins, than it has been at any point in our lifetimes. So I would urge us instead to embark on a risky educational project. Assert what we believe unflinchingly and do our best to explain it. Let our example be our defense. We need not humanities apologists, we need a humanities offensive. What we must also perhaps do is initiate a multidisciplinary conversation about the mission of the university. The task of reaching consensus about higher education's goals and purposes across the divergent ideologies of the disciplines will be difficult, especially at large multiversities where the faculty has stopped even talking across disciplines, let alone negotiating across the divides separating professional schools, sciences, and the humanities. But we can't make a public case for higher education without some consensual definition of our mission. What's the overall purpose of higher education? What special responsibilities does it have in a democracy? What are the key elements of the university mission? If it turns out that we can agree that preparing students to be well-informed participants in a democracy represents at least a partial goal and a mission we can all support, then I think most of the current disciplines may be able to specify contributions they can make to that common purpose. And perhaps we will realize that suppressing those purportedly less profitable disciplines, even though the strongest of them bring in substantial tuition dollars rather than corporate contracts. We calculated a couple years ago that my own Department of English brings in $6 million tuition dollars more than it costs to run the department. So I don't think that we're in the red. Perhaps we will all need to be willing to bankroll poetry. But the larger task of preserving the humanities is, I think, the heart and soul of the larger project of saving higher education. And it does need saving. The last few months should have made that clear to everyone. No one predicted that 2010 to 12 would be the years of humanities program closures at SUNY Albany and elsewhere. Even though press hostility to tenure has been on the rise for several years, you can hardly find a national reporter who is sympathetic toward tenure. They just don't exist. We weren't expecting legislative assaults on tenure this year, even though some candidates for state office included attacks on public employee collective bargaining in their 2010 stump speeches, though Scott Walker didn't, interestingly enough. That was revealed 3 or 4 nanoseconds after he became governor. We were not expecting an organized, multi-state legislative campaign against collective bargaining to sweep the country, reaching critical stage in Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, and Florida, and in progress in Michigan. The Ohio initiative to apply yeshiva language to public university faculty, declaring them managers not eligible to organize, took everyone by surprise. The yeshiva decision was sort of a joke when it was made in 1980 by the Supreme Court. You're finding a faculty member now who feels like he or she is managing the university. I don't know where you'd locate them. On Mars, perhaps. Meanwhile, except for the reactionary think tanks planning the maneuver, I doubt if any of us anticipated this year's Wisconsin and Michigan raids on faculty emails we'd considered private. Nor had we imagined the thoroughly grotesque Texas effort to quantify and assign dollar values to faculty productivity on an individual basis. In terms of this thoughtless protocol, I trust I'm in the red economically, having been there politically for some years. Finally, the assaults on university labor centers, a target for several years, have intensified, and widespread antagonism support public employee pensions is still building and building.